Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today in my series on dissertation writing and academic tips, I would be talking about an often neglected aspect of working on a PhD, and that is handling the demands and expectations of your dissertation committee. Now, please bear in mind that my experience is only of the US university system, and that too within English departments, and it could vary depending on where you are. Now, in United States, first, the most important things is the students constitute their own dissertation committee. That means that committees are not nominated by the department or the institutions. The makeup depends on the university policies. Some universities, like my former universities, you only needed 3 members from the department. The university that I graduated from, Florida State, required 3 members. One of them had to be an outside the department member, and then the college was supposed to appoint one person from their side whose job was to keep an eye on whether or not the procedures were followed. So if you have the liberty of constituting your dissertation committee, it will have your supervisor or director and 2 other members. First, coming to your director, what is the most important thing, in my opinion, isn't whether or not they are the biggest scholars in the field or they are an important professor. If they are all that and also good mentors, then yes, choose them. But if you have to choose between someone who is a leading scholar in the field but doesn't pay any attention to the students, and someone who might be an emerging scholar, established but working towards it, but is known for working with the students and helping them, choose that person. And here is the reason. While you're writing your dissertation, your director is the one you go to asking for questions, even asking for emotional support. And you don't want to be entrapped with a person who is too busy, doesn't respond to your emails, and has no compassion for what's going on in your life. So choose the person who you know will work with you, is competent, but with whom you can go and talk about what else is going on in your life and who will understand that. That is crucial. A director's job isn't just to give you scholastic and academic guidance, but it is also to support you and to constantly encourage you to finish through positive feedback. So choose keeping that in mind if you're lucky enough to have the choice. Same with the committee. Ask only those professors to be on your committee who, 1, can work well with your director, and 2, with whom you have established some form of a relationship. They may not be experts on the subject, but the director is. But these should be people who are supportive of you, who are kind and generous, and who will lend a hand whenever you need their help. Since you're constituting your own committee, don't entrap yourself into a situation where you've asked someone whom you don't know really well and who ends up being the biggest stumbling block in your progress. Now, when you meet your director, and if you know them, if you've taken classes with them, you can ask them what is going to be the process as you write your dissertation. And be very frank about it. The ideal process is where you work only with your director. That is the person who gives you feedback. You write, you go back, you meet, because then you're only dealing with one person who is an expert in your field. Try to suggest that to your director if for some reason if they're not following that practice. Most supervisors would do that. And do not involve the other committee members in your dissertation writing process. That's why you're choosing people who will not be intrusive. And here is a reason for that. If you're just dealing with your director, one supervisor, then it's manageable. First, you know them, you trust them, they are experts. So any feedback that you receive, you're only dealing with one person, right? And if it's conflicting, you can go and say, well, you said this last time, could you? But if you're dealing with two other people, three people who are not talking to each other are giving you suggestions, and you're trying to match the demands and expectations of three people, two of whom might not even know your field of study. So control who reads your dissertation, and that will save you a lot of trouble. Get your supervisor or director to help you do that. Another thing to keep in mind also is that keep a track of all the suggestions that your director gives you, right? So that at some point, if they are suggesting a new change, you can point out, but Dr. So-and-so, you said this and that's why I changed this, right? So that will remind them, oh man, I forgot, I told her to do this, right? Now the process is that the director works with you all the way through the writing process. You meet, you share, you email your writing. And the committee, legally or in terms of policy, we are only supposed to send the dissertation to them 4 weeks before the defense date is decided. That's why it is important not to involve the whole committee. Now, of course, there can be exceptions, right? If you think that you trust this other committee member who could give you some good feedback, go ahead, seek their feedback. But by and large, just working with your director will help you, will reduce your stress levels and the complications in the process of writing a dissertation, which in itself is a taxing process. Other things to keep in mind is that we're assuming that you chose your own director and you chose your own committee. When you are dealing with the whole committee, let's say in a defense, the best way to handle that is always, if they ask you any questions, isn't just that you answer the questions. You also keep in mind the anxieties about your field of study that might be underwriting those questions. And let me give you an example. My first candidate at my last job was brilliant, the best student I've ever had. But she had pre-constituted the committee and I didn't know the department well. So I went along with it. When we went to her exams defense, I realized that two of the people on the committee, she has a larger committee, were just hostile to the field of postcolonial studies. So most of their questions were not about what she had written in her exams, but were their anxieties about postcolonial studies, their lack of understanding of it, or maybe their disdain for it. But at that time, as a director, I couldn't do much. I just had to make sure that I get her through. Now, that had happened previously to me as well at another institutions, but there I just went and fired the committee member that I thought wasn't good enough. Politely, I told them we wouldn't be needing you for the dissertation. But here I was new and I couldn't do that, and she was on a time frame and we had to make sure to finish her dissertation. But to keep in mind that sometimes the questions may not have anything to do with what you have written, but are governed by or initiated because of the anxieties of the person you're dealing with, the person on your committee. So keep that in mind as well. Most importantly is the idea that you must keep in mind, and you also constantly must seek it through your supervisor, is to be sure whose direction you're supposed to follow and whether or not you are supposed to be working with other committee members or not. So these are some of my suggestions. Now, of course, the question that you will have is, what do we do if the committee is appointed for us? Even within that, there will be a supervisor, right? So you can ask the supervisor, look, I work better with one person, so what do you say that I just work with you, and when it is time, we will share it with the other members. Now that would depend on the discretion of the supervisor, but at least you have articulated what works best for you. Now let's assume that it's a pre-constituted committee and you have to deal with all 3 or 4 of them and meet their expectations. In that case, keep a record of every meeting. If someone suggests any changes, note it down. If they are oral, note it down. And if you're meeting them, repeat it at the end of the meeting, like literally read from a piece of paper. Professor so-and-so, let me get this clear. You have suggested me to do this, this, this. Is that correct? And they will say, yes, that is. You note it down. So that tomorrow, when you go back to them and they try to change what you have written to something else, you can go back to your notes and you say, what, I made this change because you suggested this. Would you like me to undo it? So that tells them that maybe they've forgotten what they had asked you to change, right? So that enables you to take some control over what kind of changes are requested, recommended, or asked for, right? So keep records of one-to-one meetings where the instructions are oral, or if it's through email and they gave you written comments, save everything. Now, I'm not saying be confrontational or agonistic, but what I'm saying is that politely pointing out to a committee member that they had previously asked you to do something else and you did that, and now they're asking you to change it back, it kind of makes them think about their own actions a bit reflectively and gives you enough power to control what is going on. And this is if you have to work with the committee members and if the committee is appointed. Now, let's say if you're applying to a British or Canadian universities, most universities have pre-constituted committees, so you actually apply to the committee for your PhD. There too, look at the names on the committee, go research them. If you know someone at that university, ask them what kind of professors they are. So chances are there too, don't go for the biggest name, but rather do your research and find out who would be easier to work with, who would you be able to trust and work with in a comfortable manner, and then pitch your dissertation to them in the British or Canadian system. So these are some of my ideas about how to handle dissertation committees and how to gain at least some control over what's happening as you are writing probably the most challenging work of research. I hope these are useful to you. Let me know what you think, and as always, please post your questions in the comments if you have any, and I'll try to answer them. Thank you so much. Stay safe, be generous and kind, and I'll see you next time. Until then, peace and love.